Okay. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Hey, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Cameron Brenchley. I am, I guess now I'm a vice president at Collaborative Communications, and it's a education PR firm in DC. And before that, though, I was working at the U.S. Department of Education as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Communications. And what that really means is I oversaw speechwriting, digital media, photo, video, and website. And so pretty much anything that went out of the building that was public facing as far as PR comms goes, that it came through my office. And then during my 5 years at the U.S. Department of Education, I spent 7 months at the Office of Digital Strategy at the White House. The Office of Digital Strategy is the office that oversees the website, all social media assets, and then kind of a lot of the new things that the White House is doing, collaboration with places like medium.com and sort of new outlets that don't fit the traditional media role. And so I worked there for 7 months. And before that, at the beginning of my time at the U.S. Department of Education, I was the director of digital strategy. I was the first one at the department. I created the office there. They didn't really have any social media. They had accounts that were poorly named. And I came in and took over and was a one-man shop for a long time and then built the office. And now it's, when I left, it had 5 spots for digital strategy. So that's where I've been in the last 5 years. Before that, I was on Capitol Hill working in congressional offices. And before that, I was in the Air Force. So it's been an interesting in Washington, D.C., and happy to answer any questions.
Who's got the first question? Go ahead. You might just yell out.
Okay. My question is, does your daily routine consist of the same thing every day, or is it like very different every day?
It is very different every day. Now that I'm in, a firm, I have a number of different clients and I'm working on different projects. So for instance, today I spent 3 hours at a client's office. We're redesigning their website. And so we spent 3 hours doing exercises about who their audiences are, what the goals of their audience, or what the goals they have of reaching those audiences. So that's much different. And then tomorrow I'll be flying to Tallahassee to kind of do the same thing with another client, but a completely different project, which is data visualization in big data sets. So, and then yesterday with another client talking about their media strategy and kind of marketing aspects, more social media oriented, and their strategy in certain states to become a thought leader. So it's different every day, and it has been since I've been in communications. There's just something new every day that's going on.
Can you talk about your transition from a government position to that of the private sector?
Yeah, absolutely. Government, my experience in the government was a little bit different than when you think of a government employee. So there's a lot of people don't realize that in an agency, there's folks that work no matter who the administration is, and then there's political appointees who are appointed by the president and serve just for the duration of that president's term. And so I was the latter. I was a political appointee. And so our mission is a little bit different than, well, the mission as the Department of Education is the same, but the day-to-day mission of what your goals are as far as communicating go change a lot based on White House priorities, kind of the political climate that you're working within, and your goals to get legislation passed and implemented. So the transition has been a lot different in that I'm not as reactive. My daily work is not as reactive as it was at the department. It's more forward thinking. I'm able to plan out. One of my first projects, we were talking about redesigning a website in 6 months, and that was crazy to me because I had never worked on a 6 months time frame for anything really, because everything at the department was, you know, oh, we've got to do this next week, or the president's going to travel here, or the secretary is going to travel here, so we've got to, you know, write a speech for this, or we've got to put together a video for that. So that's been a big transition. And then, you know, but it has been a slower pace than particularly the White House, which is very, you know, long hours, fast paced, a lot going on. And I mean, I guess the other thing is that you just get to work with a lot of people across the country. And I didn't really get that opportunity as often in the department where you're really working inside the building with, you know, key stakeholders.
Yeah, I have to I keep muting and unmuting our mic because when the video comes out, there's overhead speakers here, so it feeds back into it's really bad on the recording side. We never notice it, but once the recording starts, it's pretty bad. Who has another question? Go ahead.
So on your LinkedIn, I was looking and I saw that you got your bachelor's degree in history. Like, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So what were your like original career goals? Like, what did you plan on doing with your history degree, and like how did you kind of maneuver to like digital strategy and stuff?
So I fell into it. I originally wanted to be a lawyer, and I thought that I was on a path to go to law school. I even bought LSAT materials. And then about halfway through my bachelor's degree, I decided I didn't want to go into law. I wanted to go into politics somehow. And originally I thought, oh, I'm going to go into campaigns or legislative affairs. And so I used my GI Bill to come to DC and start a graduate program in legislative affairs. And I got an internship on Capitol Hill. And I thought, oh, this would be a great way in the door. And I got an internship in a communication shop in the House Committee on Ways and Means. And this was in 2009 when social media was just starting to be big and everyone wanted a Facebook page, and Twitter was, you know, just coming out. In fact, not a lot of people talked about Twitter at the time. It was mostly Facebook. And there are even some people still talking about MySpace, believe it or not. And so the committee that I served on needed a new website, and I was like, oh, I can figure this out. I can do a website. I'll do it. And so I got together enough information to rebuild their website, and I crowdsourced it. And then I set up social media accounts, and you know, you're probably familiar enough with Capitol Hill to know that they have all these hearings, and they sometimes use hearings as a way to really get a message out. So they just use it as I mean, some hearings are legitimate in that they really want to listen to the testimony and the hearing. Some hearings are just for show. And so those hearings, we weren't capturing the video of the congressperson, you know, kind of doing their dog and pony show. I can say that now, you know, years after. But so I set up a way so that we could capture that video and then put it on our YouTube channel, and also give it to the offices so they could send in their newsletters. So anyways, long story short, by the time I ended my internship, they said, oh, you can't leave. You set up all this stuff. Why don't you stay? And I said, sure, I'll stay. And then once I was there, I started doing more traditional comms work, press releases, writing speeches, and I just fell into it.
This is where I start calling on people. Shanta.
Okay. One of the topics or themes that kind of surrounds you is reaching new audiences and the ability to maximize different features. And so at a more everyday user level, what would you recommend is either your preferred route or what you think is the best route, which techniques to use to reach out and to kind of absorb more connections?
I would say, so right now I'm really, you know, are you talking about a personal basis or professional, or more if you were running a business?
I would say more on a professional basis, whether it be business or I guess still keeping your own ties to your business, more business-like.
So I definitely think that LinkedIn is the premier place for this right now. You know, it clearly has the most users. In the last couple of years, its user base has really grown. They're seeing a lot of success right now with their influencer pool and being able to publish your own thoughts on there. And I think that they have a pretty good model for keeping in contact with folks. In fact, maybe at some point it's almost spam. I mean, I'm sure many of you are on LinkedIn and you get the emails every day. I try to opt out of as many as possible, but I do think that LinkedIn is the premier place to stay in touch with your contacts. I will say that Twitter is good for keeping abreast of whatever your interests are. So, you know, if you're going into science and you want if you're going to an accounting and you want to know what the latest news is and what's going on in the top accounting firms, Twitter is the way to do that. And, you know, I don't usually use Twitter anymore for keeping up personal contacts because the engagement on Twitter seems to just have gone down in the last couple of years. And I know that there's exceptions to that rule, but at one point I was able to go onto Twitter and start conversations with folks and they would talk back and you could have kind of a communication, and I don't have that anymore. And I don't think it's because I've changed. I don't think it's how I've changed how I've used it. I just think that Twitter is evolving, and I know that if you keep up to date with this stuff, they're having problems, and their last quarter they lost 2 million active users. So, you know, I would say that Twitter's, you know, maybe not the best going forward, and so we'll see if something takes its place. But for business and professional purposes, LinkedIn's definitely the way to go.
Go ahead.
So I'm an accounting major, and I was wondering, what are like some good firms and some people maybe I should follow on Twitter or LinkedIn?
So I mean, I would definitely, if you said accounting.
Yes.
Yes, accounting.
Yeah, I would, one, I'll bet you could search, you know, top 20, top 100, top 50 people to follow on Twitter for accounting, and there's probably someone's aggregated a list. And, you know, the Wall Street Journal and, you know, the financial newspapers, the financial magazines. And from there, you can start seeing a conversation evolve. You can start seeing who those folks retweet. And, you know, if you pay enough attention and you dedicate a little time, you're going to start curating a list of folks that really matter. You know, and I don't know, I've never checked out every industry, every firm. Of course, there's giant accounting firms, and I'm sure that they probably have Twitter accounts. Who knows how valuable they are, but you know, that's how I would do it. I would Google search it, and you could probably find a ton of blogs or, you know, someone's aggregated lists that make it really easy to just find the influencers in that area. Or search the hashtag accounting.
Patrick. You want to see what a deer in a headlight looks like?
I had a question, but it was kind of answered. I guess, what was your most like pressure-filled day, like at the office? Like, what would that look like?
You talking about now or the White House?
At the White House, I'm sorry. Like, well, what did that look like, or what happened?
Can you hear?
Yeah, I heard the question. So I would say the most pressure-filled days at the White House are surrounding the State of the Union. The State of the Union for the Office of Digital Strategy is huge because they have turned it into an online digital event that, you know, most people probably don't know, but about 1 million folks tune in to watch an enhanced version of the State of the Union address. So it's a split screen where you have graphics on one side and the video on the other. And then in conjunction with that, there's just a lot that goes into it. So when I was there last year, part of my job that day was to run the Twitter mirror, which sounds crazy, but Twitter has a kind of a mirror, which is really an iPad in this fancy looking case. And we were highlighting the folks that were sitting in the First Lady's section. You know, you probably know that the First Lady, since Ronald Reagan, invites guests to sit with her, and the guests generally have a very compelling story that kind of match what the president will say or highlight his priorities. So, you know, if you're talking about immigration, there probably is someone invited to sit up there that has something to do with immigration. So we had all those folks on a Twitter mirror. And so before they went over to the State of the Union, they stopped by and we took their picture and they did a little tweet out. And so that was part of my job that day, but which doesn't sound very stressful, but the day itself, because there was so much going on, was the most stressful day that I ever worked there.
Just speak up a little bit so you can, yeah.
Digital platforms have really grown the past decade during President Obama's terms, and we see new ways of politics connecting with the millennial generation, who is the biggest group of using technology and social media. He has used—
Is this your question?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just.
He has used Google Hangouts and live YouTube streaming to answer questions people have and getting them to find a conversation, which is his tagline. And what goes on in the White House when deciding how to utilize digital platforms like that? And are there any reservations? And also, how do you think it will expand in coming years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there was a lot of hesitation at first. Even when I was there, we used to joke around about Snapchat, and it would be like, oh, we should do Snapchat. And then people would just laugh and be like, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. And then they joined Snapchat this year. And I think that shows just what you're talking about, that Snapchat's really evolved in the last 2 years. You know, 2 years ago, I remember reading an article about Snapchat, and the founder and CEO of Snapchat was trying to convince people it wasn't about sexting. That's gone, way out the window now. It's a legitimate platform that on the night of the Oscars, or I'm trying to remember the last event, if it wasn't something similar to the Oscars, had more people tuning into the Snapchat story than tuned in on TV. So it just kind of shows the evolution. So going back to kind of your question, how it's decided is kind of a gamble. I wouldn't say that there's an overarching strategy, but it's really, you take each individual event. And so we would sit down in a planning meeting and say, oh, the president's going to Asia next month. What should we do? And so you just start having a brainstorming session, and it's like, oh, it would be cool if we set up a web presence that did this. And oh, we should have someone take over the Instagram feed to do this. And we should do this cool video. And so that's really how it comes out. There are times that there's hesitation. And funny enough, it usually hasn't been the president himself. It's the people in between the digital office and the president who take ideas to, and he doesn't want to do that, or he would never do that, or it's beneath the office of the president. And so while I was there, one in particular was getting him to do a short 15-second Instagram video, or he used an iPad for the first time I'm sure he used an iPad before, but using an iPad to kind of highlight something, and now I don't even remember what it was. Those things were kind of a tough sell to the top staff, but when he did it, he was like, oh, that was great, we should do that again. And that even goes for things like Between Two Ferns, if you've ever seen the president on Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis. I mean, that was before my time at the White House, but I'm sure that was a ridiculous conversation, right? Showing Between Two Ferns to staff and being like, oh, we want the president to be on this. And I'm sure he had hesitation going into it. I would have. But it turned out great. And it really was kind of a turning point in getting support for the Affordable Care Act and getting more people signed up. So, you know, in the end, I know that the president met with senior staff communication while I was there. I didn't go to that meeting, but he met with senior staff and he said, look, I like what's going on. I like what's happening. Keep pushing. Let's do more. And so I think that's really where this stuff is coming from. And he has just a willingness to do this. So that's great.
Go ahead, Paula.
When you were at the White House, were there any limitations on your personal or social life because of the nature of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. For the folks that work at the White House, you really kind of shut down your account. So I took my Twitter account private, and my other accounts were private already, my Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, it's one, you work long hours, so you don't really have time to be tweeting. And then you're under a certain level of scrutiny, right? So anything a staffer does while they're at the White House could really become a problem if you're not careful. It goes the same for any business, right? Like if you work at Taco Bell and you decide to post a picture of doing something behind the scenes at Taco Bell, you're going to have problems. So it's the same, but the stakes were much, much higher at the White House. So we were very careful about what we said.
Go ahead.
What are the best options for a small business to grow their name other than Facebook, utilizing electronic media?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a really solid web presence. You know, today there's no white pages anymore, or maybe there are and I don't know about them, or white and yellow pages. So I would say that for a small business, you really need a strong web presence, and you need to understand search engine optimization, so that when someone's searching your, website, that you come up, or your business, that you come high in the search results. Facebook's okay for a small business. I think depending on your business, it could be beneficial or not. Twitter could be okay. Depending on the type of business, if you're a professional services, you might want to be on LinkedIn, so that you can, people can search you and find you depending on your business. I would also say that you should never, and a lot of people discount this, but you should never underestimate the power of a good email. Having a newsletter or some type of information that provides helpful, insightful, or even funny information to a group of subscribers. There's been a lot of businesses that have had success. It really comes down to providing useful information that's not a sales pitch. So you probably all get emails every day. If you go to any retail store, when you get to the cash register, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. Oh, can I have your email address? And then before you're even home, you're getting emails from that business. That's okay. That's fine. But I'm talking more about using email strategically. And I'll just give one example, and then take another question, a follow-up question if I didn't answer it. There's a great little produce shop local here that I love. It's called Nall's Produce. Small business, not very big. They have such a great newsletter. It doesn't come out very often, but when it does, it has funny things in it. It has kind of what's going on at their shop. It's got recipes. It's just great. It's just a great way for them to stay connected with me. And it's not over too much sales in it. It's just a great way that I feel like I'm part of their community. I would say that email is a great way to do that.
Our connection's breaking up just a little bit there. One of my students is actually home and she's sick, but she's watching. She wants to know, how much pressure were you under when having to do a project? And if you had a typo in your tweets running under the White House flag there, how much trouble you got into?
So we never had any typos at the White House. It went through too many checks, but I did run the Secretary of Education's Twitter account and help him run it. And we had many typos because we did not have as many checks on our system there. And you know what? That's not a big problem. When it comes to social media, people sometimes are forgiving, not so much for the Secretary of Education, but you can quickly follow up. It's usually fixable. You can either delete the tweet. If it's a typo, you can just delete the tweet and get it. If you say something horrible, you need to go into crisis communication mode. Hopefully I've never said anything, we've never sent out anything horrible as far as you may have some businesses, someone accidentally tweets out a personal tweet and it was supposed to be from a business. That's never happened with us. But there is a lot of pressure. There is a lot of pressure to get it right. When it comes to social media, you just have to proofread and make sure you're doing it. And also don't be tone deaf to your audience. And I think that's a really important skill to have when you're working in social media and you have a job. A lot of people are like, oh, we'll just put our intern on our accounts and the intern can run it. But at the end of the day, it really takes some talent and skill to kind of know an audience well and know how to use the platform so that if you want to have a really successful account, it takes talent and skill.
All right, Cameron, I appreciate your time. We're actually we're out of time here, and I'm sure they're dying to go home, right? Look at them. No, they want to stay all night. But we really do appreciate your time, and take a look at your Twitter feed around 11:58 next Tuesday when their blogs are due at midnight, and your Twitter feed will blow up. So.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And if you have any more questions, just feel free to tweet me or, shoot me an email. You can get it from Kyle. And this is awesome.
All right. Thank you so much and have a good night.
You too. Bye.
See you.